to raise the issue of women's choice, so there has to be some kind of compromise.
Well,
but like it seems like with you guys' position, there is no way to compromise. This problem is never going to be solved.
But in terms of control of one's body, I used the example earlier about my right to swing my arm stops when I hit someone in the nose, but the rhetoric of I have the right to control my own body, when we actually see it's another's body involved, is somewhat similar to the rhetoric I have a right to control my own property, the rhetoric used by white slave owners with regards to slaves. So would there be any compromise on that issue where people thought slaves were property?
So there are property, they're people.
They're not property, they're people. And I would say that's not the woman's body, that's a person.
See, that just depends, like, when, it's a hard question, when does life begin? That's like, it's a question you can't answer.
Well, you're right about that's the question. I would challenge your premise that it's something we can't answer, because let me ask you this, when would you protect life? When would you draw the line and not allow abortion?
Partial birth abortion. I like to let it be for the first 3 months and then no partial birth abortion. It seems the best compromise is the issue of rest.
So if you allow for the first 3 months, which, by the way, is when 90% of abortions occur, 90%. If you draw the line there, why draw the line there?
To solve the problem. I'm done with this issue. I'm just done.
But when
that's the more important issue that we can be solving. Because this seems like an issue that if we don't find some kind of compromise, it's never going to be solved.
But that's what people said about slavery and other injustices.
Oh, that's what the Civil War is for.
So it comes down to defining when does life begin, and do we have good reasons for our claims? And if you draw the line at 3 months, what would you just say to someone who said we draw the line at birth?
At birth?
Yeah. What if someone said, no, you're wrong, it's not 3 months, it's birth?
Well, because that's a radical position that most people won't be able to support. Like, I'm not.
But what if most of the people were convinced to support birth being the line?
Well, that's a hypothetical that's not true at all. Most people wouldn't support that.
We would like to think today most people wouldn't support, let's say, slavery or the Holocaust, but there was a time where most people did, because even if they weren't doing it, they were letting it happen through indifference.
So even right now, most people are still fine with, I guess, like abortion up to the first 3 months. Like, once you start going to partial birth abortion, then people start having a huge problem with that.
Okay,
so it seems like
you said we don't know when...
At least first you could start to compromise there, but like, the issue doesn't end. Like, maybe abortion would be fully illegalized after a while, but like, it's at least one way to getting the issue going. Like, first, let's say, okay, put in the stop in the line of partial birth abortion, and then let's see what happens later. But at least it's some progress. And
there's a matter of political strategy, you could say, where what politicians are going to do. But my question is, in terms of education, let's just talk about when life begins. Because if we establish life begins at fertilization, it doesn't make sense to arbitrarily draw the line at a certain level of development. It also doesn't make sense to say we don't know when life begins and then draw the line at 3 months. Because if we draw the line at 3 months, guess what? We're claiming we know when life begins. We're claiming life begins at 3 months. So we do know when life begins, but then the question is, are we right? Well, what's the difference between 3 months and 2 months? Only age. The same difference between 2 years and 20 years. Age. But there's not an identity or substantive difference. Our identity began at fertilization. A follow-up, and then the guy behind him has a question.
I recognize you guys as the extremes, and knowing that, I think I agree with what he says. There's definitely, America's built on compromise, and without a compromise, you're going to keep fighting about the issue. So, but there's also a problem with now recognizing that there needs to be a compromise on issues such as rape, because if a woman gets raped, she's impregnated. She doesn't know until she starts feeling it, and then at that point, your law would dictate that she should keep the fetus of someone else's child. So, I mean, do you recognize that this is not perfect? That your solution is not perfect?
I'll recognize that my solution is not easy. And I'm going to propose the idea that there's a lot of resistance to what I'm saying because it's hard. You know, there's 2 teenage guys, I think they're brothers, they're like 18 and 20 or whatever, and they have this tour, they go across country speaking just to teenagers, and the theme of their tour is do hard things. That in life, we're all going to face challenges, we're all going to face obstacles, we're all going to face really difficult situations, and often what's right isn't easy, but we do it because it's right. What I'm proposing is not easy, and it most certainly is not easy for the victim of a sexual assault. It will be unimaginably difficult, but the injustice is the sexual assault. if it's wrong to victimize a born person in the case of a woman, it's also wrong to kill an unborn person in the case of the preborn child, because in both cases, we're dealing with human beings. The abortion won't erase the rape. A rape victim is going to take longer than 9 months to get over the trauma of sexual assault. So rather than eliminate the trauma, we simply add to it. Not only has she been raped, but now she's going to experience a medicalized rape in the form of an abortion.
Yeah, you said that your rights stop as soon as you're hurting someone else. Well, isn't that what a baby is? A baby's just invading you?
Good question. I would say far from invading me, the baby is doing what she should be doing in my body, which is growing and developing in the uterus made for her, not for me. Barring the case of rape, we're talking about also a child growing in my body as a result of consensual sex, where pregnancy is a possibility of that. And, you know, just imagine for a moment, I travel a lot, you're in an airplane, okay? So you get in the airplane, it takes off, you're in a properly pressurized environment, so, you know, you're safe. Now let's imagine the pilot decides, as you're up in the air, that she doesn't want passengers on her plane anymore, and she orders the stewardess to kill you. Or let's imagine that the pilot decides she doesn't want to be on the plane anymore, so she parachutes to safety as the plane crashes. You see, in that environment, you would be a very weak, vulnerable individual, totally at the mercy of one person. The only person, the pilot, who knows how to fly the plane. And I think in that situation, we would say the pilot parachuting to safety, or the pilot having the people on the plane killed, is doing something wrong by abandoning the pilot's role of flying the plane, doing the only thing that that pilot can do to bring everyone to safety. I think we'd all echo the sentiment from Spider-Man when Peter's in the car with Uncle Ben, and Uncle Ben says to him, "Remember, Peter, with great power comes great responsibility." And so yes, the child is solely dependent on the mother's body, but not invading her body, in the right environment, the environment she should be in, and with the power a woman has to control the very destiny of her offspring, comes the responsibility to protect and respect that offspring's life.
Okay, I guess another point, something I learned, like, okay, so when, let's say a woman wants to have an abortion, and, like, let's say we live under, like, a well-behavior law where you can't have abortions, and she's forced to have the baby that she doesn't want. And so a lot of times when women who want to have abortion don't have abortion, they're going to be stuck with a kid that they don't want, and most likely treat the kid very horribly. So I guess, what would you say, like, if a woman who wants an abortion, like, obviously she doesn't want the kid, is probably not going to be a good mother. So I guess, what would you say about, like, that fact?
I would say, would we kill a child in the situation of already being unwanted because the child is neglected and abused? And we wouldn't. We would say, well, we need to remove the child from the abusive situation and put the child in a better situation, be it a foster home or an adoptive home. So our attitude generally is, in the face of hardship and suffering, we alleviate the suffering without eliminating the sufferer. And so the same would follow then if a child the woman's pregnant and she doesn't feel she can give the best to her child. Instead of eliminating the very child, she alleviates the situation and the problems that will come by putting the child into the care of an adoptive home rather than doing that to the child. You know, if you think about it, in society we see needs all the time, right? We can all read this poster here. These aborted embryo and fetus photos are real. We can read that, but you know the vast majority of the world can't. The vast majority of the world is illiterate. That's a need. Now, in the face of the need, do we kill the people who can't read, or do we kill the problem by teaching them to read? We kill the problem, we teach them to read. Nowadays, we see handicapped entrances, ramps, we see handicapped parking spots, all these things that are designed to address a need, those of disabled people. But 50 years ago, oftentimes those responses weren't there, and our society said, okay, there's a need. Instead of doing what Hitler did by killing disabled people, let's address the need by establishing a system to help them. So you're highlighting a need by pointing out people are unwanted and abused and neglected, but the solution is to address the need by making them wanted, making them loved. And that means being selfless. It means giving of ourselves. and that is a challenge, but it's also